everybody, welcome back to T's Theses. What have you guys been up to? What have you been reading? I know it's been a while since I put out my last video, and I'm gonna apologize for that. Sorry, but life got in the way. But not only did life get in the way, I kind of got into my own head. I was creating these videos, I was putting them out there, and it kind of felt like nobody was watching them. And so I was like, really, I was writing a book, so I'm like, I felt like I should put that first. But then one day I signed into my YouTube account and I saw that I had some comments on some of the videos that I was creating, and people wanted to share their perspective with me on the book videos that I was putting out. They wanted to share their perspective on the books that I had read. And I was like, that's what I started all this for. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to have my own little book community where people would share with me their perspectives on the books that I read. And not only did y'all didn't have to agree with me, but I like hearing other people's points of view on the books that I read. And I thought, hey, people are commenting, so maybe my videos are reaching the people that I want them to reach. And so I was like, okay, maybe it's time that I get back to making these videos. And so even though I wasn't making videos, I was still reading because I'm a writer. I have to read. Some people out there don't believe that, but if you want to write, you need to read. And plus, I love reading, regardless if I was writing or not. I love reading. I love reading books. I love getting lost in a story because, sometimes life ain't so great. And sometimes you can find yourself getting inside of a book and, you can find a whole nother world that's a lot more interesting than the one that you're living. And so, as I said, I was still reading over the summer, and I wanted to share some of the books that I read with you in today's video. And so first off, we're going to start off with one of the books that I love. One of the books that I loved this summer was Razor Blade Tears by S.A. Cosby. And one of the things I really loved about this book, you could actually read this book and see a movie playing out inside of your head. And so the story centers around these two men. They're kind of like, a little bit gangster type men. They both spent time in jail, and they have sons, and their sons are married to each other. And so there are these hardened street guys who's not so okay with knowing that they have sons that are gay. And the problem with that is not that they just didn't have a problem with their sons and they're not in their lives because of the direction that they have chose to live their life in, is that at the beginning of the book, their sons get killed. And now they have to come to terms with how they pushed their sons away, now their son's gone, there's no chance for them to get back. There's no chance for them to have a place in their lives like they thought maybe one day that they would. And so they take it upon themselves to find out who killed their sons because they don't believe that the police are doing their jobs. And even if they did, they still feel like those are my kids. And so we need to find out what happened to them. So both the fathers, Ike and Buddy Lee, join forces to find out who killed their sons. And it ends up being a pretty unsavory group that killed their sons. There's these bikers involved. There's some shooting. There's a lot of killing going on in this book. But like I said, the one thing that I loved about this book is written in a way where you are seeing everything that's happening. You're seeing this whole story go down. These characters are out there, but they are enjoyable and they are relatable. And so if y'all want to read a book that's not your typical read, but one that's going to really take you inside the story, I suggest this book. So next up, we have Night Watching by Tracy Sierra. And so this was an interesting read. The reason why I picked this book up is not one that I usually would have picked up. The reason why I picked this book up is because I am in a reading group on Goodreads. And this was one of the books that we were reading for the month of July, maybe. And the book starts off, the writing is not something that I'm used to. And had it not been for the fact that I was in this reading group, I would have stopped probably after page 5, because the author doesn't just tell you the story. She doesn't just say what's happening in this world. So this is not a time set in our time. It's set kind of like our time, but it's a little different. You figure out at one point that the world is covered in snow and people aren't able to just get out and go like they want to. And so they're homebound, but it doesn't come out and say it. You have to kind of read between the lines to figure this stuff out. And so this woman is homebound and she's in her house with her kids and her husband's not there, but you don't find out later on that her husband died. And this man breaks it. And her and the kids find a way to hide inside this little cubby hole in the house. And she runs through the forest. She gets out. She leaves her kids there. She runs through the forest. These trees in the back of her house. And she goes to her next door neighbors, the closest neighbor she has. And she knocks on the door. Her feet are bloody. She's got hypothermia. And she tells them that somebody's in her house. So they call the police and the police get there and there's nobody in the house. And they think she's making this story up. They don't believe her. They think that she's out of her mind. They look at her. She's lost a lot of weight since her husband has left. She's lost a lot of weight since her husband died. And they think she's basically delusional. And all they can see is this woman who's crazy who left her kids home alone. And so they don't want to believe her. However, she keeps seeing like things that this guy is still around. And she starts remembering things that's happened over the last couple of months of seeing shadows outside and her daughter talking about this man, and she's believing that the daughter is having these nightmares. And eventually we find out that this guy has been sneaking around inside their house for months. And eventually there's the showdown at the end of the story with her and the police that never believed her. And even though you don't want anybody to die when it's not a horror novel, you kind of want the person who's been telling you all along that you're crazy to kind of get what they deserve for not believing you. And so it's kind of, I guess this book is supposed to get you to think about how women are seen in society, how because we're seen as a weaker sex, that men kind of just ignore some of the things that we say. And so it's an interesting read, but like I said, it takes a little while for you to get into the story with the way that the writer writes. And I think it is her debut novel, so she might already have another book out by now. And so next up, we have another book that I wanted it to be better because the premise of this book, The Weight of Blood by Tiffany D. Jackson, I wanted this book to be better than it was because the book is kind of like you have Carrie meet Firestarter. So you have this girl she's a black girl, but she's been passing as white in her because she lives in a small town where basically segregation still is alive and well. And her father makes her straighten her hair, and one of her biggest fears is about it raining because the first day of this book it rains and her hair is a flagrant afro. And so I tried to picture what this would look like and I just couldn't. I tried for the longest trying to picture what this white girl would look like with a big gigantic afro, but I just couldn't do it. But once the people in her school, once the white folks in her school find out that she's black, all hell breaks loose. They're teasing her relentlessly. They were already teasing her because she was already keeping herself off to the side because she was raised by her father who kept her isolated from everybody. She was homeschooled till the city came out and found out that she needed to be in school, and they forced her to go to school. And so, you know, she's the odd man out in this. And so she's the, you know, the first person that the bullies are going to pick on, and they pick on her religiously. And so the day that she gets this afro is the day that everything snowballs from, and crazy stuff starts happening. There's an earthquake in her classroom that doesn't go anywhere else but the classroom. And then there becomes this whole thing of race, where segregation, and finding out that she's black, that some white girls are trying to prove that they're not racist. One of the white girls tries to push her boyfriend off on Madison, or AK Maddie, and they start having feelings for each other. But Maddie really can't trust things because she's not really sure who's trying, you know, because she's been bullied before. She's been made to feel part of the group only for them to set her up to let her know that she's not part of the group. And so she's very wary of any nice gestures from anybody. And so basically there's a prom like in Carrie, and she's set up again like in Carrie with the blood, but with paint, and she gets doused, and that just sets off a whole stream. So this doesn't just go down within the barn that this prom is taking place in. It goes over in the country club where the white folks are having their prom, because at the barn is the black people's prom. So people die in the black people prom, people dying in the white people prom, and the whole city or town is game. Everything is game in this book. Maddie goes through this town and destroys it. A lot of people die. We have police cars flying, people getting crushed. It ain't pretty. And so one of the things, the reason why this book couldn't be as much as I wanted to be, is told from several perspectives, and and at one point random perspectives show up near the end of the book that I didn't think needed to be there. And there's this whole relationship with Maddie and the boy from the school where I don't know. I don't think we needed his perspective in the story. I would have liked for the story to just been told from Maddie's perspective, what she was going through, what she was dealing with, because I didn't feel like those perspectives added anything to the story. They just took up space. And so next, I got another book for you guys called The House on McClellan Street. This is written by an indie author. This is written by an indie author. So The House on McClellan Street, we have a cast of characters who get on the bus that takes them to McClellan Street. And they don't know how to get there. They don't know why they're on the bus. They don't know why they're headed to this street, this house on the end of the street. But they end up getting there, and they go inside, and eventually they get a little bit wits about them, because at first they're kind of like in a drug state. But even though they still don't know who they are and why they're there, at some point the house reveals to them why they are there. And two of the characters have done something kind of bad. And one character, the older guy, his dog dies. I get maybe why one of the characters is a woman. It's two women. It's an older woman, a woman in her 20s, and an older guy probably in his 60s. Okay, so I get why the middle-aged woman is there, and I get why the young girl is there. I don't really get why the guy is there, because his dog died. But the woman killed her husband, and the girl is responsible for her sister dying because of a drug overdose. And even though I get kind of why they're there, it's not really explained why they're there, because they don't know why they're there. They get their memories back, they deal with them, but not to the point where it really changes anything. Not like they have this life-affirming awakening to tell them why they were brought there. And so I ended this book kind of wanting more, kind of like not knowing why it was written. And so I don't know, maybe it was me. Maybe the plot of the story, maybe what is it called? the thing that you get when you read a story that's supposed to wake you up when you read one of those stories or watch one of those movies, a lesson. Maybe the lesson of the story was lost on me. I don't know. So maybe y'all can read it. It's a short story, so maybe somebody who's read it can let me know what the lesson might have been that I missed out on, you know. Fiction. I'm a fiction author. I'm a fiction reader. So, you know, nonfiction. And so last but not least, we have I Was a Teenage Slasher by Stephen Graham Jones. And this is another book from Goodreads Reading Group that I would not have read. I think we're sensing the theme here. I would not have read had I not been in this book club, because I would have stopped D and F in this book. That don't sound really good. I would have did not finish this book somewhere in the beginning because I don't know. Somebody kind of got a little angry with me because I made a comment that some of these sentences, and not just me, that some of these sentences had to be gone back and read over so many times, and I still didn't know what the heck this author was trying to say, what he had his character trying to relate to us. I don't know. And I was told that that's how the author writes, and I'm like, okay. I didn't know if that's how the author wrote, or maybe it needed some editing, because it could have. You know, it could have been how the author wrote, but it might have needed an editor to clarify those sentences. But hey, we may never know. But anyways, as I said, some of these sentences just didn't make any sense. And so the story is about a guy who becomes a slasher, like Jason, like Michael, and any of y'all know I'm in love with Michael Myers. And so of course I had to read this book. And so it's told from the perspective of how he became a slasher, how he became somebody that couldn't help but kill the people that had wronged him. And so luckily for Toby, he has a best friend by the name of Amber, who is well versed in slasher movies. And so he has her around to help guide him as he becomes this psychotic killer. But luckily, but not so luckily for him, he's not in control of his body during these times. And so, sorry, I'm skipping ahead. So what happens that leads Mr. Toby to become a slasher is he attends this party, and people kind of don't really like Toby. And he's, again, is like Maddie from the other story, where he's the person getting picked on. Luckily, he has a best friend, whereas Maddie didn't. But he's the guy that gets picked on, and he has a peanut allergy. And people don't really like him because of that, because every school year, you know, you got the kid that got the peanut allergy, and kids are told that you can't bring certain things to school. And so they kind of hold that against him. And he's also kind of the guy who nobody likes, but he kind of makes himself known, like trying to get attention, because I guess he doesn't really know that he wants to be liked. But anyway, so it happens in the story that he gets tied down to a pool chair, and these kids shove peanut butter into his mouth. They know he's allergic to it, so he goes into anaphylactic shock. And his best friend, who's supposed to be there for him, she's off inside the house, not knowing any of this is going down. And so while he's tied down and about to die, this other boy that was bullied and got killed because of bully, got murdered because he was bullied, he comes back from the dead. And some kind of way, the blood of this boy gets inside of Toby's head, where he scratched it earlier because of his best friend Amber, and the blood basically transfers this killer slasher virus inside of him. And so because of that, he in turn has to follow the slasher rules, and he has to kill everybody that has wronged him. And albeit they kind of deserved it, even though in the story he tries to make out like maybe they didn't. But I'm telling you, if somebody ties you down to a lawn chair, a pool chair, and puts peanut butter in your mouth knowing that you're allergic to it, they know you're gonna die. So, you know, they get what they deserve, especially in a horror novel. And so one of the things about this story is it kind of has a lot of repeating, like he's kind of repeating himself within the story, saying some things that he said in the chapter before and the chapter before that. And then there are times where it just seems like it's long and drawn out and unnecessary. He's trying to give you all this background information on why he's a slasher and how he hides himself from other people, and the big showdown that has to come down because, you know, there has to be that last person that gets killed within these slasher movies. And so I didn't start enjoying this book until the last 1/4 of the story. That's when the story picked up. That's when it became interesting, when we got to the last showdown and when we thought the last person who was going to be the last person wasn't the last person. And then how his story played out when he finally got away. And that's not really a spoiler, because, you know, Michael and Jason, they get away. And so it got interesting in the end. And so I was leaning towards 2 stars for this book, but because it ended up being pretty good at the end, I gave it 3. I liked it. But I think Stephen Graham Jones, from what I have read on reviews, you're either somebody that likes his writing or you don't. It's kind of controversial. And I kind of feel like those are the stories that kind of last, that kind of get a lot of readers, because you want to find out why people liked it. And then either, you know, you didn't, but then he still has a following. So, you know, that's good for him. But I'm not going to read any more of his books. And so that wraps up my summer reading list. If any of y'all have read any of these books, let me know. Let me know what you thought. Drop it down in the comments, or let me know what you're reading. If y'all have read anything great that y'all want me to read, just because you liked it, just because you thought it was something good that I needed, you know, you got to tell somebody. Let me know. Drop it down in the comments. And y'all guys, until next time, take care, stay safe, and try to do something nice for a stranger so we can all make this world a better place.